Hi, my name is Amy Hall. I'm the Director of Sciences at Digester Doc, and we are in the business of making digesters healthy. We have recently grown to be the largest EPC-based biogas lab in North America. What we're going to talk about are the 10 ways to kill your digester. But since we're business people here, I'm pretty sure what you're here to find out is what not to do. So let's talk about some mindset shifts that will help us keep digesters healthy, help them making the most biogas, and getting the most out of your investment. The first mindset that I want to address is what I call magic box mindset. It's basically thinking that we can just throw everything into our digesters and methane comes out and we really don't have to overthink it. At its heart, a digester is a lot like either growing microbial cultures in a flask in a lab, growing a sourdough starter in your own kitchen, or even your own digestive system. It's a microbial community and it has specific needs and a specific environment that it needs to be taken care of and in order to work the way it's supposed to. First things first, we cannot ignore pH, temperature, and all the other things that just seem boring. Microbes are tough, right? They'll figure it out. And the reality is that's not how it is. We've had customers recently, I believe they're in their startup. They had at least a 20-degree Fahrenheit change in their temperature in their digester, like over the course of a day or two. And what happened was they were making zero biogas. And that's because microbes have a specific temperature range where they work optimally. So by knowing this, we want to keep those temperature shifts down to a degree or two. The other thing that people may or may not understand is that when pH changes, it's not linear, it's actually exponential. So pH changing from 6 to 7, the digester microbes, they won't feel it, like a 1%, they're going to feel like a 10. It's a 10 times change. And if that pH drops from 7 to 5, they're going to feel it 100 times. So pH is one that we really want to keep an eye on. Also, knowing that pH drops usually show that the digester is fermenting and not making methane. It's very important to understand what these parameters mean and why we want to keep them from swinging wildly one way or the other. And another thing to consider, we want to remove the solids, right? It's less clean out, should save us money, but methane is measured in milliliters of biogas per gram of volatile solid. Another set of digesters we worked with within the last year, they had been told by their engineers to remove the solids before putting their waste into their lagoon. Extremely low solids was creating extremely low biogas production. And we actually went through, we did the math, and we showed them how if they increased their solids, even just doubled them, they still would be incredibly low, but they would triple their revenue, which would make it affordable to clean out those lagoons twice as often, which really wasn't all that often at all because they weren't putting any solids into it. The thing is you can't just feed microbes water. Water has no nutritional value. So if you start removing everything, going through solid separation before it gets to the digester, your microbes may starve. And again, that means low biogas production, low revenue. Your investment isn't getting what you put into it. Another problem that we have seen is let's just throw some food into the digester. It's all organic waste, just put it in. The problem is that not everything that is organic is easily biodegraded, and not everything that's biodegradable is beneficial to the microbes in your system. So years ago, we were helping a plant and they put biodegradable packing peanuts into their digester. And they found out in a hurry that those have the potential to take down your digester in a matter of hours. We have had other people who have sent us hops. Hops are organic, they're plant-based. What people don't seem to think back to is, why do we put hops in beer? We put hops in beer because it stops the microbial processes. It is 100% antimicrobial. And by putting that into a digester, we would see a huge drop in biogas. Now, this company actually sent us samples. We tested them against a control that didn't have any, and even hops that had been fully processed through a brewery can degrade the biogas production by like 50%. Those that are not processed, just raw hops, cut the biogas production to 5 days, and it was minimal production. So again, by not understanding or not vetting the feedstock first, it's possible to actually kill your digester, and that means months of downtime trying to get it back reestablished. It's also lost revenue from all that time. It's expensive to clean out. So again, please do not just throw anything into your digester expecting it to work. We tested another sample about a year and a half ago for a company that we found toxic amounts of aluminum. And this was a huge problem because we're talking like 5,000 ppm aluminum, huge amounts of aluminum. And it took some investigating to find out where it is. But sometimes just because the feedstock comes from maybe a food processing plant, it may have a flocculant that has an ingredient that's potentially toxic. So it's always good to know what's going into your digester before you just throw it in. And then we also have feedstocks that are not toxic, they're not harmful, but they also are not treated. So we get a lot of samples in that are from brewers, from distillers, and we get spent grains. And if we just throw those into a digester, they're really not going to do anything except add mass and volume to your digester. What happens is every bit of available energy that was already there has been consumed in the fermentation process. So what we need to do then is take these feedstocks, treat them first, break them down further, get the locked energy out so that the methanogens can get to it, and then they can actually make methane. So not everything is a hard no, but we are also seeing a rise in energy crops, grasses, other waste products, mostly from the agricultural industry, but also paper products. Yes, they'll biodegrade over time, but if you treat them first, sometimes you can get them to actually digest in a digester. But again, a small amount of testing up front could tell you if that's a feasible product. And along with that, we do feasibility studies. So we recently have been working with a company that has multiple feedstocks. We have tried multiple treatments, and we're helping them come up with a recipe to get the most biogas. And sometimes there will be a feedstock that maybe won't work, but at least then we know before going into it that it doesn't go in, it doesn't degrade the biogas. And then there are nutrients. So just like us, bacteria need certain minerals to work as cofactors for the enzymes in their little single-celled bodies. Now, how much do they really need? And what are metals? Metal ions, we all hear about how we need magnesium, we need calcium, so do microbes. By understanding the composition of feedstocks or digester effluent, we can actually supplement the digester and get better methane production by making sure that they have everything that we need. The other thing to know about mineral levels, like I've mentioned before with the aluminum, is that sometimes those levels become inhibitory or even toxic, especially when they're soluble. It really depends on the feedstock. It depends on the microbes in the system, but there are general rules that we can follow. If we test the input and the output of the digester, we can then understand better how to treat and how to get the most biogas. One of the things that we've discovered in our lab is that by treating with micronutrients, cobalt being the first one, I think almost every biogas additive out there has cobalt in it for a reason, and that's because it can actually shorten the retention time in the digester, which means that you're getting the energy out of your product without having to leave it in longer than what you planned for in the beginning. Unfortunately, untreated samples sometimes in our lab might have a 50-day retention time, and it's not profitable, it's not realistic. So by supplementing, You'll actually get more energy out, which then relates to more biogas and less waste product coming out in the effluent as well. Again, I've said it before, not everything that is organic is biodegradable, but also not everything that is organic is healthy. So not everything that we eat is good for our systems, and we feel it. Not everything that is organic is healthy for your digester. Let me talk about caffeine. The caffeine molecule is organic, and it breaks down. Unfortunately, it breaks down into isobutyric and butyric acid. And buildups of those will actually cause inhibition in the digester if you don't have microbes that can then break them down. We're seeing this a lot. It's becoming a really common issue to see this kind of buildup in digesters, even in healthy digesters over time. So caffeine. And what we've seen in the food industry, sometimes we get people who want to put energy drinks. And we did testing. We know that it's not the artificial sweeteners, it's actually the caffeine. Another thing that we have seen in our lab is people want to test solvents. Now, one of the things we use solvents for is to sanitize and kill bacteria. Again, bacterial system, so we don't want to put these things into a digester. The other thing is please don't send those to me because I have to pay to have them disposed of, and that makes it more costly for you. Just give us a call. We also had a client that had an experimental compound that they sent us. And by just looking at the ingredients, we were able to tell them that, no, this is 99% sure that this is toxic for your digester. So really a little bit of work in the beginning, a lot of profit in the end. Another thing to consider is that sometimes feedstocks can come with higher ammonia levels. Sometimes it's good to let those sit and volatilize a bit before putting them into the digester, but also making sure that when you have wastewaters that they aren't full of disinfectants, because again, we don't want to kill the digester, we want to feed it, we want it healthy. Essentially, it's a pet. Give it a name, feed Steve good stuff. And bad practices. Extra mixing, hotter temperatures, rapid changes, more efficiency, and that's really not how microbes work. If we want to change systems, we need to change them gradually, but we also need to consider all of the parameters. Big picture thinking here is what's going to help. What I've seen a lot lately, and it's a little confusing for me, is thermophilic processes in dairy digester systems. Now, it does make sense when you take the manure and you heat it up, you're going to start breaking down and you're going to get a lot more volatile fatty acids, which are then converted to methane. So that sounds good, right? The problem is your digester is seeded with microbes from the cow's gut, and the cow's gut does not live in thermophilic environments. So we have the potential there to sterilize the product, and the only things living in the digester are then those microbes that have survived the sterilization process. What we want to do is we want to wait to turn on those thermophilic systems until we have a healthy digester with microbes that are robust and can handle the increased VFAs, but also that have not gone through this kill step, basically. Because yes, the increased VFAs are great, they're amazing, but we need to make sure that we're feeding them to methanogens. Another thing, over mixing, undermixing. Undermixing is probably the biggest problem that I see in the industry. We have very slow flow digesters, and all of the methanogens will float to the bottom. It works almost like a moving lagoon, but without agitation, because methanogens are non-modal. They can't move on their own. They need that agitation, they need that movement in order to come in contact with food molecules and to make methane. So biggest thing is we don't want to stress our microbes out, but we also want to make sure that they're in good, healthy environments that allow them to do what they need to do. Again, assuming that every feedstock is the same, every digester is the same. If it works somewhere else, it works here. Food that's created in America gets to a digester, it's not going to act the same as the food in Europe when it gets to a digester. The other thing is that plant material grown in India is grown in different soil and under different conditions than plant material that grows in the US. And so it is going to have different nutritional values. It's going to have different components. And that's why we can't just say that it works somewhere else, it works here. I can even tell you that among dairy manure, Jersey cow manure is different than Holstein cow manure. They actually have different requirements in a digester. Sometimes a couple degrees and a little bit higher pH, and that's what it takes to get an exponential amount of gas out of this digester, as opposed to just getting an okay number. The other thing is to remember that just because it is a feedstock and just because there's an industry expected standard of gas doesn't mean that that's what you're going to see. I think just about everybody understands that dairy manure is supposed to get 240 milliliters of methane per gram of volatile solids. Sometimes we don't get that much because the system isn't up to par, the microbes aren't healthy, or they're not in good community balance. But also, we have seen dairy digesters get almost 400 milliliters of methane. So don't assume that what the standard is what you can get. A lot of times we have been able to exceed that in our lab, and we can help our customers exceed that as well. And lastly, relying on a little bit of information to tell you the whole picture. Your TSVS, your total solids going in, they're perfect. Your pH is perfect. What else do you need? Oh, your phosphatic is great. What else is there? Phosphatic is fantastic. It's the ratio of alkalinity to volatile fatty acids. The problem is that a titration-based VFA number to get that calculation, titrations calculate everything as acetate or acetic acid. The problem with that is if you don't know the speciation, you could have an isobutyric acid buildup. So your phosphatic number might be great, but you might actually have the wrong kind of volatile fatty acids. If you don't have acetate, formate, and in some cases propionate, so 1 carbon, 2 carbons, or 3 carbons, you may not have the right food for your methanogens. You might not have a working digester because that isobutyric acid buildup has caused a decrease in methane. What we need to make sure is that we understand fully how much carbon do we have in our digester and how much of that is actually digestible to microbes. What are the VFAs? What are the mineral contents? Getting a whole picture of your digester and getting that routinely will help to keep you from seeing these crashes, or checking on things as soon as the methane production starts to dip. The other thing that we haven't really talked about is H2S. And a lot of the things that we do to make methanogens healthy keep H2S from being formed at such high concentrations, because those two types of microbes, the ones that make hydrogen sulfide and the ones that make methane, like very different environments. So understanding the bigger picture of your digester and not just 1 or 2 key parameters is really what's going to help you stay on top of the health of your digester and keep it making methane for years to come. So to recap, think of your digester as a biological system and not a magical black box. Maintain stable conditions, pH, nutrients, temperature. Vet new feedstocks and avoid antimicrobials. Optimize solids retention and pretreatment, and track multiple parameters for long-term success. As I'm sure you can see, by avoiding these mistakes, you'll keep your digester healthy, your biogas flowing, and your profits growing. Thank you.